Videos about the D700 are quite vast and they're all over the internet. I've done my share. I've compared this camera to the D810 and the Z6, and overall it seems to perform quite well, but today I'm just going to focus and dive further into the D700. The D700 is a real nice camera to have. It is actually a great camera to have in your bag as a backup, as a to-go-to camera as well. But it all depends on the kind of work that you do. So if you're a person like me, the D700 is extremely helpful. I'll tell you one thing, and this is upfront and without being biased or whatnot. Mirrorless cameras are by far the best thing that ever came out. And that's because it eliminates all the mirrors and the mechanical movements within the camera itself. But the D700, for some reason, seems to have gone even further, a step further in perhaps getting both of those aspects together in one and making one real good camera. But I tell you one thing, if you have nothing else out there and you can only afford a couple of $100s for a camera to start working, or whatever it may be that you have in mind as far as photography, this is a very solid foundation to start with. The D700 by far will give you the best image. And the colors are not going to be very different to that of what's being offered right now. For example, the Z6. Adobe is providing an extra profile lately for the Z6 that it gives it a little pump in the darks and all that stuff to make it look better. But other than that, if you leave it in the normal profiles, you'll see that the colors from the D700 all the way to now, any camera you pick, they're all exactly the same. As far as sharpness, they're very sharp. As far as quality, they're very much the same. ISO, I ain't gonna lie to you, it's lacking on the high end, but due to the fact that it's an older camera, Lightroom will allow you to shoot at the highest level and you'll get a real nice image. So, do you need to upgrade to the newest camera? Or should you start here and just say, you know what, this is where I should be, this is that's all I need. And the Z6 and perhaps any other cameras that are coming out, like the Z6S or whatnot, should those be what I should be aiming for? If you have no clue, then perhaps you should start here. The D700 is a great camera to have. It is by far the best camera that came out in the early 2000s, and thus far, even still now, it's extremely relevant. It is a beast when it comes to colors, when it comes to quality of image, and if you know what to do, it's perhaps the only camera you need. I can tell you this much, and this is from personal experience, if you own your own printer and you're doing your own prints, it doesn't matter what kind of camera you have, because you can manipulate that in Photoshop prior to sending it to print, and you can get really good images even from a 5 megapixel camera. You can't discard the quality that came out of this camera, the color profiles, everything about it was awesome. There's absolutely nothing wrong, and you can even use a tripod and you get better quality of images. But as far as print, how it looks, what it can be used with, this camera is perhaps the best budget-friendly camera you can afford right now. All the lenses that were made for the FX body work in this camera just perfect, whether it be mechanical, screw-on, digital, without an aperture ring, it don't matter. It all works just perfect. As far as specs go, the D700 had the most respectable specs there was for its time, and let's say until now. Even though it's a 12 megapixel camera, it was extremely nice for when it came out. It came out in the era of the D3, and therefore that's its older brother with much more, with many more features. But this one, in its bare quality and the way I use it, it was just perfect. Its highest ISO capability natively is 6400. You can push it up to maybe, I think if it goes 2 more, maybe up to 25,000 or 12,000, I'm not quite sure, but it's got H1 plus H3. Anyways, so it goes that high. Its base ISO is 200, and you can push it down, I believe, all the way to 64 in photography, but it's native, it's 200, that's where it starts. The other feature about it that hasn't changed one bit since Nikon has released all the digital cameras is the bit depth in RAW format. This camera right here has a bit depth of 12 and 14 with an Adobe RGB and native RGB profiles built into them. So why do I say that? It's because even on the Z6, you can only go up to 14-bit. You cannot go any higher. This 14-bit, 12 megapixel, 12 years ago. So as you can see, nothing has really changed except for the capabilities to do videos with the newer camera. Additional features that were native to the D700 was the fact that it was a full frame camera and it has a built-in flash. Your built-in flash came in handy, but it wasn't the best thing around there. Obviously, you don't want to use built-in flash or any light coming from a camera directly onto your subject. It's not as flattering as you want it to be. So therefore, it's available, and it's up to you whether you want to use it. I personally never used it. The Nikon 700 is basically a classic car, and the Z6 is your Tesla. You have everything you require here. May not have the horsepower that the Tesla may have, the Z6, but it has everything required for you to get from point A to point B. Handheld images on the Nikon D700 are great. There's nothing wrong with them as long as you got a good stable hand and you know what you're doing with your lenses. Now, if you get ones that have VR, obviously your camera images are going to be better. Now, if you're going to go handheld, you obviously need to use it in its native format, the mechanical format. You cannot be using the mirror up on that one. The mirror up is not going to be your best friend. When you use the mirror up system in this camera, obviously you cannot see through the viewfinder. The viewfinder works through the mirror. Therefore, if you want to use the back end, it's just going to give you the screen on the back. The slapback of the Nikon D700 is very minor, it's not that strong. So when it goes up or goes down, it doesn't really affect the image that much. There is a minor effect, but it's not that big. I wish I knew about that feature of the mirror up back then, honestly. I had just barely started using that in the last couple of months, and I really love it. I didn't think it was going to be that useful or that much of a difference, but it is. And it's not just in this system, it's in all the DSLRs. I highly recommend this camera as a secondary camera, as a backup camera, whatever reason you may have to want to acquire this camera. You'll never regret the colors, and you'll never regret the type of photos that it's producing. This camera does not have any of the bells and whistles, like I said earlier, of the newer cameras. So you do lack Wi-Fi, you do lack Bluetooth, you do lack GPS, and there's some other features there as well that you will not have. As a photographer, you shouldn't really need it. It's unless you're doing studio work, then yeah, get it. You know what? It has a USB port, hook it up, and then there's your connection to your computer so you can work directly to it. And in fact, I think this camera is by far the one that gives you the least amount of problems when you hook it up to a computer, due to the fact that it has low pixel count, and therefore it transfers really fast. The cons, Tesla-like features on this camera, you know, like I just mentioned, the GPS, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, and all that stuff is not built in. I believe you can buy all of those features additionally, but why should you? Why would you want to? They're expensive, and none of them work as good as what is being offered now in the newer cameras. So for that reason, if you want to use it as it is in its native format, it is a really good camera for you to have right now. Besides the pixel count, all the high ISO, the noise count in this thing is pretty high at 6400. Actually, it's not that great once you pass 1600, I believe. But the thing is this, Lightroom has a better engine now. Even a 6400 ISO picture from this camera, it is very much usable, and you can reduce that noise in Lightroom without an issue. So shooting at 6400 in this camera, no longer an issue. Before, I would not even attempt to do so whatsoever. It was no pass 1600. So those are the specs. Those are the minor cons about owning this camera. If you think those no's outperform the pluses of why you should own a camera that you can get for less than probably $300 right now, you're being very picky, because this is a camera that you should be wanting to have now. And who knows, due to the high demand and everything there is about it, I can probably tell you they'll probably be worth some money in the future. The Nikon D700 may be the first digital camera that may become a classic. Therefore, if you don't have one, I would highly recommend you owning one. And if you have one that's older, send it into Nikon for repairs. Make sure that it's up to date, refurbish it, make it new again, you know, and keep it around. Keep it in a box if you don't want to use it. But I'm pretty sure that will be worth some money in the future. Hopefully I'm right. And if I'm not, at least you have a real good camera at hand, save up someplace that you could use at any time.